Thank you for joining our Debbie's Dream Foundation Nutrition Programs webinar series with Oncology Dietitian Marie Morande. I'm Jackie Bello, Programs Manager for Debbie's Dream Foundation, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. We'd like to thank our nutrition sponsors, silver sponsors, Merck, bronze sponsors, Daiichi Sankyo and Bristol Myers Squibb, and supporting sponsor, Lilly Oncology. First, I will share information about stomach cancer and Debbie's Dream Foundation. Then we will hear a presentation on nutrition with Oncology Dietitian Marie Morande. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A discussion. You can type your questions throughout the presentation into the chat section that appears on the webinar menu. We will address questions at the conclusion of the presentation as time allows. In 2019, it was estimated that more than 27,000 Americans would be diagnosed with stomach cancer each year. Many patients are asymptomatic during the early stages of stomach cancer, leading to a late diagnosis. Also, stomach cancer is on the rise for young adults. Debbie's Dream Foundation is dedicated to raising awareness, advancing funding for stomach cancer research, and providing education and support internationally to patients, families, and caregivers. Our ultimate goal is to make the cure for stomach cancer a reality. You can learn more by visiting our website at debbiesdream.org. Pictured here is Debbie Zeman, the founder of Debbie's Dream Foundation. Debbie was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer in April of 2008. She had no risk factors and only vague symptoms. At the time, she was told her chance of being alive in 5 years was only 4%. She endured harsh chemo regimens and targeted treatments and experienced many reoccurrences over 9.5 years. Unfortunately, Debbie passed away on December 23, 2017 at the age of 50, after a 9.5-year battle with cancer. She dedicated herself to helping others with stomach cancer by raising awareness and providing resources and education. Debbie founded DDF in April of 2009. As an organization, we will continue her important work and legacy. In a few short years, DDF has achieved many great milestones. We have 34 chapters across the US, including Canada and Germany. Our PrEP program provides patients, their families, and caregivers matched with survivor and caregiver mentors using disease-specific criteria, including stage, biomarker, and location. We host educational webinars and symposia year-round, and our website contains in-depth information about stomach cancer. We have also provided $1 million in research grants to date and advocate each year during our Stomach Cancer Capitol Hill Advocacy Day to add stomach cancer to the Department of Defense's peer-reviewed cancer research program. This past Advocacy Day was a huge success. We hosted 115 advocates, making this year our largest turnout yet. Due to the efforts of the foundation, our partners, and our dedicated advocates, we helped secure funding in the amount of $110 million, a $20 million increase from last year. Here you can see some of our upcoming events. To learn more, please visit our website under the heading Events. DDF is headquartered in Plantation, Florida. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Also on this slide are important phone numbers and email addresses you can use to contact our office and staff. We will now begin the presentation on nutrition with Oncology Dietitian Marie Morande. Marie is a registered dietitian and certified specialist in oncology nutrition. She has worked for the Lynn Cancer Institute for the past 12 years and has over 20 years of experience as a clinical dietitian. She provides multiple nutrition lectures each month at the Lynn Cancer Institute and provides counseling service to cancer patients. Her lectures emphasize survivorship and wellness as part of the Thomas Oxley Center for Cancer Survivorship and Wellness program. Marie has contributed multiple articles to Coping with Cancer magazine, most recently, Take Charge of Your Gut Health, what can be found in the May-June 2020 issue. Marie graduated from the University of Florida with a bachelor's degree in human nutrition and completed her dietitian internship at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida. I'd like to thank Marie for taking time out of her schedule today. And now, Marie, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Jackie and Debbie's Dream Foundation for having me. I just want to make sure you can all hear and see me okay?
I can.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me just see if I can advance these slides.
Sometimes press it up or down or left and right. There we go.
Okay, so our topic today is nutrition parameters for gastric cancer. Again, my name is Marie Morande. I'm a certified specialist oncology nutrition here at the Lynn Cancer Institute. And my basic outline is going to be discussion of gastric cancer prevention and wellness nutrition recommendation, with a little bit of emphasis on specific foods that have been researched related to gastric cancer, managing nutrition challenges, including the post-gastrectomy diet recommendations, and then moving into survivorship and wellness. Gastric cancer is caused, generally speaking, from an accumulation of damage to DNA in cells that cause rapid abnormal growth beyond what should be normal. There are two types of stomach cancer. Cancer in the area closest to the esophagus would be called cardia, and cancer in the body of the stomach is called non-cardia. Interestingly, cases of cardiac gastric cancer are rising while non-cardiac gastric cancer cases are falling. For cardiac gastric cancer, being overweight or obese, along with gastroesophageal reflux disease, also known as GERD, are risk factors. For both types of cancer, heavy alcohol use, smoking, and being sedentary are risk factors. In non-cardia cases, general risk factors include diets low in fruits and vegetables, a diet high in salty and smoked foods, a family history of gastric cancer, infection with Helicobacter pylori, inflammation of the stomach, smoking, and stomach polyps. Many of these factors are modifiable. Following that plant-based diet to reduce risk means eating an abundance of fruits and vegetables. It has been linked to lower risk, especially when a diet includes garlic, onions, citrus, raw foods, and lycopene-containing foods. And we'll talk about all of those in a little bit more detail. There are many nutrients in fruits and vegetables that act to protect our cells and reduce risk of cancer growth. The reason why we want to protect our cells is because that accumulation of DNA damage comes from damage from environment or oxygen species, and many of these nutrients in foods act as antioxidants and protect those cells from that damage to reduce that cancer growth. So nutrients and foods of interest, specifically lycopene, we mentioned lycopene-containing foods. Lycopene is a carotenoid. It acts as an antioxidant in foods associated with red or pink colored foods. Lycopene has been linked to lower stroke risk, lower prostate cancer risk, lower colon cancer risk, along with a reduced risk of stomach cancer. Foods containing lycopene, especially cooked tomato products, tomato juice, spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, ketchup, even salsa. Cooking makes the lycopene easier to absorb. Generally speaking, in a tomato itself, lycopene is going to be bound in the structure of that tomato. As that tomato cooks and that structure softens, we're able to absorb out the lycopene. Another trick to be able to absorb lycopene better is to always have a little bit of oil with your tomato products. Pink grapefruit, watermelon, papaya, and guava are also good sources of lycopene. Those don't have to be cooked. Allium foods contain flavols and organosulfur nutrients Information from a large EPIC study shows promise to decrease risk of cancer when consuming allium and citrus foods. And that study was directed at gastric cancer. Allium foods are onions, garlic, scallions, leeks, chives, and shallots. Other foods of interest are foods containing carotenoids, specifically alpha-carotene, beta-carotene, lycopene, lutein, beta-cryptoxanthin. These all act as antioxidants and neutralize free radicals, therefore protecting the DNA from damage. May also decrease cell proliferation and a blood supply to cancer cells, and enhance your immune system, fight that Helicobacter pylori, and reduce inflammation in the cells. Foods high in carotenoids, and there's a long list obviously, but asparagus, broccoli, and apricots, cantaloupe, carrots, tangerines, kale, mangoes, collard greens, pumpkin, your other winter squashes, and sweet potatoes. Now, many of these are your orange colored foods, but not all of them. Obviously, broccoli and kale would be some of your, and asparagus would be some of your green foods. Now, vitamin C coming from our citrus food is another food of interest. Studies are conflicting, but show potential for decreasing gastric cancer risk. Potential mechanisms include being an antioxidant to protect those cells from damage, reducing that inflammation in the stomach, reducing nitroso compounds, which is the nitrogen-containing foods, and fighting that Helicobacter pylori. These citrus foods, of course, is oranges and tangerines, grapefruit, pineapple, and kiwi. First, just as a personal note for people who have a little bit of difficulty tolerating the acidity in oranges and tangerines, pineapple, you may try the small kiwis. It's a good citrus food and a little bit less harsh on the stomach. We're going to move a little bit to foods to avoid. We talked about the processed meats, the nitrogen-containing foods. Processed meats is going to be your hot dogs and bacon and salami and pepperoni, and basic cured meats, salted and salted foods, foods high in cholesterol, yes, and high intake of animal proteins. Alcohol, especially when combined with smoking. So the combination of both is especially a problem for gastric cancer risk. So I'm going to move forward with managing nutrition challenges when a person has gastric cancer. Malnutrition is quite common in patients with stomach cancer. 28% of patients having sarcopenia, which is a loss of muscle mass due to reduced intake of calorie and protein. Sarcopenia increases the risk of complications after surgery, and malnutrition impacts our immune system and increases the inflammation. So the primary treatment for gastric cancer involves gastrectomy, which is surgical resection, and chemotherapy. Surgery reduces intake, can remove absorption areas, cause discomfort, and causes diarrhea. And in addition, chemotherapy may cause further loss of appetite, sore throat, dry mouth, taste changes, nausea, diarrhea, and fatigue. Managing nutrition challenges before surgery. I want to bring up a study found on exercise and nutrition intervention program, was able to reduce that muscle loss and improve after surgery recovery. The program consisted of resistance training, walking 7,500 steps daily, and taking in adequate calories and protein to meet, if you were doing calculation for your calorie needs, 28 calories per kilo of an ideal body weight and 1.2 grams per kilo of an ideal body weight. They also included a source of 2.4 grams of HMB, which is hydroxymethylbutyrate, The best source of HMB is Juven. Now, HMB is a protein metabolite. It's been looked at and studied for gaining lean body mass and healing, especially came out initially for wound healing. And Juven is your best source, and I believe you can get that online, and sometimes you may be able to find it in some stores. Um, So nutrition after stomach surgery. Surgery often, as I mentioned, results in a smaller stomach, a change in the valve function. Common problems include dumping syndrome, fat intolerance, and potentially a lactose intolerance. To minimize these intolerances, specific eating guidelines should be followed. Long-term concerns to be aware with after a stomach surgery is vitamin B12, iron, and folate deficiency. Along with the possibility of osteoporosis, supplements may be needed, and you would want to monitor your levels with your physician. The set of dumping syndrome, as I mentioned, a very common side effect to stomach surgery. It's a set of gastrointestinal distress associated with the rapid emptying of the stomach into the small bowel. The small bowel does not like this. Our bodies are created in a very controlled manner. So our stomach is the reservoir for food that we eat, and it trickles that food into our small bowel. Unfortunately, that doesn't work anymore. A lot of times after a stomach resection, like I said, that valve doesn't work, or you have a very small reservoir and everything dumps into the small bowel. This is going to cause diarrhea. It's going to cause bloating and stomach upset, nausea. It could even cause tachycardia, and if you have late effects of this dumping syndrome, you get a low blood sugar, hypoglycemia, and dizziness. Specifically related to dumping is simple sugars into the small intestine. The body tries to dilute these simple sugars, bringing water into the system, causing cramps, loss of electrolytes, and diarrhea. After surgery, day 1 and 2, obviously, you're going to start with water and ice, and then some other liquids like broth and diluted juices and jello, and most importantly, you want to start with very small portions, half cup portions at a time. Once this is tolerated, you advance to a soft, easy to digest foods for the first 6 to 8 weeks. I emphasize very important, chew foods well. Why? Because your digestion process and your chewing foods happens in the mouth, which is still functioning properly. And that's going to start that digestive process. If you can chew your foods well and get it into a very soft, moist mush, essentially, or even almost liquid, and swallow it, you have much less work that the stomach has to do. So chew foods well for the rest of your life. Limit refined simple sugars and lactose. These are the types of foods that can cause that dumping. Right after surgery, you're going to avoid fried foods, greasy foods. You're going to choose low-fat foods. And just as important is to separate liquids from meals. Not everybody might understand or hear about this. You want to drink fluids 30 to 60 minutes before or after a meal. Why? One, the liquid is going to fill your stomach up and make you feel full. Then you may not eat solid food for that meal. Second reason is that those liquids can push or flush all of the foods that you are eating straight into the small bowel, and that will increase your risk of dumping. And you especially want to include a high protein food at every meal or snack. You may have a very small volume of food, that you can tolerate. It may at first, like I said, be half cup portions, maybe a cup portion because your stomach is very small. So you want to put your most important nutrients into that stomach first, which is going to be high protein food and then nutrient dense foods. There are some situations in some patients who may be started on jejunal feedings. Jejunal feedings is a type of artificial feeding. You get you have a tubing that enters into the jejunum, which is the small bowel, and feeds through a formula. This allows the stomach to heal. This allows us to not have to put anything into the stomach, be able to drain the stomach, and be able to allow that to heal without any irritation. And this is going to be in a situation where you're not anticipated to be able to eat for a while after surgery. Jejunostomy feedings require a continuous pump feeding. Again, you're not going to put a whole can of a feeding or something like, let's say, Ensure or Ensure Plus straight into that small bowel. It's the same concept as that dumpling syndrome. Usually we use a low fiber formula, starting at a very slow rate and advancing to a goal rate, and those goal rates are usually calculated by a registered dietitian. And you will use the jejunal feeding until you're able to tolerate an oral diet, and then that feeding can be removed. So foods to choose and avoid during this initial couple of month period are low fiber breads, soft rolls, crackers, pasta, white rice, cooked cereals or dried cereals with less than 5 grams of sugar and less than 2 grams of fiber. Some examples would be, say, Corn Chex, Rice Chex, Rice Krispies, Corn Flakes, Cheerios, a Special K, or Product 19. If you want brown rice or, say, cooked kasha or instant oatmeal, it's going to have to be a much smaller portion to come within that less than 2 gram fiber level. So it's going to be about a half cup serving or a half a packet of oatmeal. So you specifically want to avoid sugar sweetened breads, coffee cakes, muffins, donuts, bread with syrup or sweet sauces, and definitely high fiber foods with more than 3 grams of fiber. At this point, your stomach, your GI tract has gone through a major surgery. It's inflamed. It needs time to heal. So you don't want to put these fibers into the system and aggravate and irritate the bowels. So that is the goal here. You want to choose high protein food, as I mentioned, for every meal or snack. These should be tender, well-cooked poultry, which is chicken or turkey, fish, meat, eggs, soy. You could do smooth peanut butter in small quantities because it is a little higher in fat, or other nut butters. Right after surgery, you may want to avoid a lot of lactose, which is the milk sugar. So you want lactose-free milk or a plant-based milk. You can do hard aged cheese. We do a mild cheese. Don't do anything too spicy or sharp. But generally on aged cheese is lactose free. So that is an option. And yogurt, but you want a plain yogurt or an artificially sweetened yogurt because you don't want all that sugar in that yogurt. So you want to avoid that sweetened yogurt, flavored milks, raw nuts, seeds, dried beans and peas. Again, those are just too rough and too hard to digest for your inflamed system at this point. If fat is causing discomfort, which is very possible right after surgery, you avoid your fried foods, high-fat deli meats, and limit the portion of those nut butters. Vegetables contain many of those important nutrients to stay healthy. However, remember, raw vegetables are going to be a problem. So choose well-cooked vegetables like carrots. So cooked carrots, cooked green beans, cooked asparagus, spinach, and winter squash. Potatoes without the skin, And you could try some strained vegetable juices. Again, this just gives you vegetables that are easier to digest, a little bit lower in fiber. If you We're avoiding the raw vegetables, the beets, the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower. These are very healthy foods, and eventually, hopefully, we can work those back in. But they're very gassy and fibrous, and probably a little too hard to digest right after surgery. And then, of course, vegetables with a lot of seeds or tough skins. And even though those tomato products were real healthy and containing that lycopene that we wanted for wellness, at this point in time, it might be too acidic and cause some distress in the stomach. Fruits, again, same. Fruits are still very important to eat for the antioxidants, but they are very high in natural sugars and can be problematic. Take small quantities at first, maybe mixed with a meal, so it's not so much of a sugar load. Choose soft fruits without an added sugar or syrup, like an unsweetened applesauce, small quantity or small piece of a banana, unsweetened fruit purees, and if available and you can find it, maybe find some jarred or canned fruits in water. You want to avoid the raw fruits at this point in time right after surgery, your dried fruits, your fruit juice, or use fruit juice in very small quantities, maybe a half a cup at a time, and fruit canned in sugar or syrup. For oils and fats, use in small amounts to avoid that fat intolerance, and any sweetened fatty foods like a sweetened cream cheese or butter or sweet salad dressings. I would definitely suggest decaffeinated drinks because caffeine is a stimulant to the bowels and may contribute to some of that dumping syndrome and diarrhea. And definitely use sugar-free beverages and avoid those sugar sweetened beverages. Now, some people find it beneficial to use oral nutrition supplements and find it as a good, easy way as a tool to get in extra nutrients. They are convenient and easy to digest. However, depending on the brand and what you choose, they may be high in fat and high in sugar. Boost Max and Sure Max are high in protein, but they are low sugar options, but not high in calories. Since it is a liquid, I would suggest using that between meals, and maybe start with a 4-ounce portion to see how you tolerate such a drink. If you feel you are okay with fats, you could blend in some small pieces of avocado or a spoon of peanut butter or coconut oil or something to that effect that might increase the amount of calories. I put the coconut oil as part MCT oil. If you haven't heard of MCT oil, they're medium chain triglycerides. And in situations where people have intolerance to fat and problems digesting fats, MCT oil can be easier on the system. They don't require the same enzymes and processes to absorb into the body. So coconut oil is part MCT oil. There's also a product called Reason. Reason is high calorie. There are 13 grams of sugar, so you may have to be careful as far as that goes. But most of the fat in that product uses MCT oil. So maybe worth trying. Maybe you use 2-3 ounces spread out throughout the day if you don't tolerate it well or something to that effect. There's also a product called Inu, which is 340 calories. Still a little bit higher in fat, 13 grams of fat, 9 grams of sugar. So these are just kind of some other options, but I would definitely start with your lower sugar, lower fat options to start with, and then see if any of these other things are helpful. So we've talked about the timing as far as separating liquids from your solid meal. So here's a sample plan using that timing. So this example starts with a cup of decaf tea, and in this sense, I kind of suggested using stevia as a sweetener for that tea. And then 45 minutes later, they have breakfast: an egg, half a cup of cream of wheat with margarine or butter, and that might be a couple teaspoons or something to that effect, and see how you tolerate. 10 a.m. they go for a snack, mild cheese, crackers, half cup portion of that canned fruit and water, which is a very small amount, and then 11 o'clock they drink some water. Noon, they go ahead and have their turkey sandwich on white bread with a little bit of mayo, and then an hour later, they drink some lactate milk. 2 o'clock afternoon is snack, half a cup of unsweetened applesauce, 3/4 of a cup of plain yogurt, 6 crackers, and then an hour later, they have their cup of water. 6 p.m. baked chicken, half a cup of cooked carrots, half a cup of rice with butter, and then a little bit of water afterwards. 8:15, they go ahead and have some decaf tea, and then 9 o'clock, they have their afternoon snack, graham crackers with 2 tablespoons, I believe. That's peanut butter at the bottom there. So that's just kind of gives you an idea of how you want to tailor that day with the separation of those meals and fluids. Now, as we mentioned, other side effects can come up. Nausea and vomiting are very common, especially if you start chemotherapy. So eating that small, frequent meals, avoid skipping meals if possible, and usually you want kind of room temperature foods. You want not too hot foods. Spicy foods can upset the remaining stomach and bowels. Foods with strong odors can bring on nausea. And again, chew foods completely. Again, if you're swallowing whole foods or almost whole foods, your stomach is going to have a very hard time churning that up and getting it mixed with these acids and getting it broken down. So do that breaking down with your teeth by chewing your foods. Ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg may be helpful as far as spices to manage your nausea. You want light, low fat, kind of cold foods usually is best if you're having a lot of nausea. And be careful, of course, as I mentioned, with tomatoes and citrus, although those are very healthy and we want those nutrients at certain times, they might not be tolerated so well. So they definitely could upset your stomach due to the acidity. Now the diarrhea, remember, it can be related to fiber intake. It can be related to the lactose intolerance. More than likely, it's related to dumping, or it can be related to a high-fat meal. So you can avoid those insoluble fibers. That insoluble fiber means it's a wheat bran, your stringy fiber, your seeds, your thick skin. It's what we think of when we think of fiber. It's the skin of food, it's the bran, it's the hard to digest parts of fiber. Limit the milk and the milk products. You can use lactate milk, you can use plant-based milks like almond milk or coconut milk or oat milk. And you can pick up the Dairy Ease pills to take with your milk product, and that'll help you digest the lactate sugar in the milk. Be careful with sugar alcohols. Sugar alcohols are not digestible, so they're put in a lot of diabetic or low sugar products. But if you start taking too much, it can cause some GI distress and diarrhea. Choose low-fat foods. You can try digestive enzymes, which may be helpful in these situations. They just give you a little extra help in breaking down that food. If you're having a lot of diarrhea, you definitely want to replace electrolytes and drink plenty of fluid. And foods high in potassium, which would be in the cases, and you can probably tolerate banana, potatoes, or avocado, and salt that you can get from broth or salty crackers or something like that. After 6 to 8 weeks, if you're still having a lot of diarrhea, you can try adding in your soluble fibers. Soluble fibers are fibers that absorb water in bulk stools. So if you're having quite loose, watery stools, these soluble fibers may help to regularize your bowels. So oats and barley, that applesauce and banana, or any other kind of cooked fruits, peeled fruits. And actually Metamucil or Benefiber may be helpful in these situations. So again, those are just to try to bulk and normalize that stool. So kind of moving on to survivorship and wellness. So after those first 2 months, you want to start at, and as long as your doctor is okay and he clears you to try to advance your diet a little bit or kind of play around, you want to start adding in new foods back into your diet. You should now know if you have a fat intolerance, if you experience dumping syndrome or lactose intolerance, and if not, you want to gradually add these new foods in these categories to determine what happens to your system. I would emphasize be patient. It does actually take the body quite a long time to truly adapt and recover from surgery. So even though it's been 2 months, some people will actually take up to a year for their systems to get a little bit more normal, so to speak, especially if you're on chemotherapy. And that almost really doesn't count because you're getting a lot of side effects from chemotherapy itself and a lot of irritation to the GI tract. You want to add new foods one at a time and monitor your system. Keep a diary, especially important. What you eat and what are your symptoms is very helpful. Since dumping syndrome is most common symptom after gastrectomy, you might want to start by adding some of the fiber back into your diet with small quantities of whole grains, fresh fruits and vegetables and beans, or maybe some of those soluble fibers that we talked about. You could start with mild fruits like peaches and apples and pears before starting your acidic fruits. Start with easy vegetables, make maybe a small salad, a little bit of raw carrots or cruciferous vegetables, and keep that diary. We refer back to our prevention recommendations for wellness. In addition, be active, manage your stress. Anxiety actually affects your bowels, and get a good amount of sleep, because that will also help reduce inflammation and anxiety and help you along the way. So hopefully I stayed on time, but thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. We did receive some questions during your presentation. I'd like to ask in the remaining time. The first question is, I've been experiencing tightness in my abdomen following my total gastrectomy. Is that normal?
I think that would be, yeah, that would be kind of a form of a cramp. I would wonder how long it's been since the stomach surgery, but right after the surgery, I think that would be fine. You can ask your doctor also if that's normal. Again, with that concept of a diary, you may want to track what you're eating at the time, or if you're drinking enough fluid, and when you're getting that tightness.
Okay. Next question. I cannot keep food down and I'm also experiencing diarrhea after eating. Any advice on how to gain and maintain weight?
The first issue is going to be address the vomiting. Obviously, you can't gain or maintain weight if you're not holding foods down. So what kind of foods are you eating? Are you eating higher sugar foods or foods that are just too high fat or something along those lines? Some people with gastric surgery can actually get gastroparesis, which is a very low pulsing to the stomach and a very slow emptying of the stomach. So some people actually just kind of hold that food in their stomach and it comes back up on them. So you might want to be evaluated for that from your doctor. And it's probably the small quantities of very, very frequent, almost like grazing all day long.
Okay.
Yeah. And I probably would find a dietitian you could work with.
Okay. My husband is experiencing terrible reflux from his J-tube formula. Any advice?
Well, the first thing is to make sure the J-tube is still in place. And are you running it on a pump? If you're not running that on a pump, it could either be expanding the small bowel or it could potentially be coming back into the stomach and causing reflux. I've had actually a situation of both. So make sure the J tube is still in place and then maybe slow the feeding down to a lower rate and see if any of the symptoms go back. Now, I've also had patients on a J tube, they don't have anything going into their stomach. So you get that reflux from just the acids that are in the stomach. So are you taking some kind of proton pump inhibitor or antacid or carafate or something for the stomach to just neutralize those acids so they don't come back up and cause reflux?
Okay. Next question. Do you recommend protein shakes?
Yeah, so we talked about the oral nutrition supplements. And as I mentioned, you just have to know where you're at as far as tolerating fat and sugar. But we mentioned Boost Max, we mentioned Ensure Max, premium protein, I've taken in the past. You can just get a protein powder like Undri. Undri is a really great company. They have protein powders, they have already made up drinks, and they actually also sell vitamins, which they sell vitamins for bariatric surgeries, which could be very similar to what you need long term after a gastrectomy. So Undri is a really good company to look into, and it's just undri.com on the web, and you can look for something that would be helpful for you. They have an unflavored, which you can mix into anything. They have a chicken soup flavored, if all you can do is eat soup. They have the normal chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and like I said, they have already made up drinks. And they're usually lower in
Great.
sugar, so it might be a good option.
Okay. I'm newly diagnosed. How do I get a nutritionist on my treatment team?
First, you have to look at your center to see if they have a dietitian on staff. If not, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has a professional find a dietitian option, and I believe probably oncologynutrition.org. The also has a way of finding a dietitian in your area. You can also look on our website.
Okay.
I may not be able to directly help anybody, but there are quite a few videos and information on our website, brrh.com/cancer nutrition.
And you can always email me at programs@debbiesdream, and I can kind of direct you guys to the link from Marie. Okay, next question. What are the best questions to ask my new nutritionist?
Well, probably what to eat as far as managing symptoms. If you're having any problems digesting foods, then that's going to be the first thing you're going to ask her about. I'm having nausea, I'm having diarrhea, I'm having a little cramping, and you guys can address that first. Otherwise, it's just going to be what's the best nutrition plan for what I'm going forward looking into. So what's the best way of eating prior to surgery, during surgery, after surgery, or long-term survivorship and wellness. As I mentioned, if you're not having any problems digesting foods, or even after your gastrectomy and you're doing really well, then you're going to go to those same cancer prevention recommendations that I talked about in the beginning. High intake of fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, lots of beans, and plant-based foods. So.
Okay. Is nitrate-free meat safe to eat?
There are still, I buy uncured turkey, bacon, and uncured products all the time. There are still some nitrates, but they're naturally occurring, usually from the seaweed that they add into these products. So we don't officially know the risk compared to a truly cured and processed meat, but there's certainly less. So it's an important option for your family, then that's what I would choose. And otherwise, if you're very concerned about nitrates, then I would avoid anything that's apparently cured.
Okay. Let's see. I feel like protein drinks help with providing nutrition, but they're always so sweet, and we know sugar is bad for cancer cells. Struggle with whether or not to drink it.
So if you're long-term wellness, survivorship, and you're able to get proteins from other sources, then I would get proteins from other sources. If you really have a hard time digesting chicken or fish or meat or soy or any of your other high protein foods, then you can look for the ones that are lower in sugar. Compare labels. Orgain has less sugar, so to speak, than an Ensure and Ensure Plus. Like I said, you can use the low sugar protein drinks and add in fats if you need the extra calories. You can blend up your own smoothie, put fruits or vegetables that you tolerate, a protein powder, some sort of fat or something like that. You can make up your own. So there's really a lot of options in that sense of a liquid oral nutrition supplement.
Great. Okay, next question. I'm 9 years out from my total gastrectomy and still struggle with eating and drinking enough. I cannot drink protein shakes. So what would be helpful for me to maintain my weight? Seemed like a common problem.
Right. So I'm assuming she's still having maybe some of the GI distress, even 9 years out, the cramping or the bloating or the diarrhea or something like that. Consider the dumping syndromes, considering what might be causing some of that GI distress. If you're able to tolerate fats, then and that doesn't give you any kind of problem, then I would add those into meals that you know you can tolerate. So you can do that on your own by adding a little extra oil or working in avocado or olives or olive oil into a meal. There's also a product called Benecalorie, which is a nutritional supplement, mostly fat-based, so I don't talk about it a lot because most people have an intolerance to fats. But if you think you could tolerate, or maybe a little bit in one meal, a little bit in the other, it's 1.5 ounce liquid. There's 330 calories, 7 grams of protein. So it may be an option to work into foods because maybe you're just like I said, liquids get to be a problem. If it's going to empty out of your stomach real fast, you may be better off with eating solid foods that are higher in calories, and then give your system a break from those liquids. And remember, sometimes with the diarrhea, water is not the best. With chronic, really bad diarrhea, you really want an electrolyte drink because the water itself could contribute to your diarrhea because it's not in that same solution as the GI tract. So you want coconut water or maybe get half Gatorade, half water, or some of these oral hydration solution powders that you can mix into the drink so that everything is equal with the GI tract and you're not pulling salt and water in and out of the GI tract. So that might be helpful if you're having a lot of diarrhea as far as fluid management.
Great. Okay, next question. It's been 2 years since my total gastrectomy. Still only eat small amounts. Is this going to be permanent for me?
It's very possible because the gastrectomy, depending on the amount of surgery you had, it really creates a very small stomach. And unless that stomach stretches, which can happen after bariatric surgery, but may or may not happen long term, you can only put so much into that stomach. So you really are going to have to eat small portions very frequently throughout the day. So yeah, you it may be long term that you have to eat those small meals.
Okay. Next question. Should we watch our fiber intake? My nutritionist has told me to stay below 35 grams of fiber a day.
So initially, right after surgery, as we discussed, yes, because fiber is just hard to digest and break down, so it can cause distress. And as I mentioned, as you get further out from surgery, you may be able to work in certain types of fiber into your diet. And you can start with those soluble fibers or some of those softer vegetables or in some light foods. But I would hope that you would be able to work that fiber back in to your diet. If there was one person we talked to that it was potentially a gastroparesis kind of issue, fiber and fats in those kind of situations may just kind of let the food sit in the stomach. So the
Mm.
recommendations for that kind of situation is definitely different. But I would, as we said, kind of work in small amounts and gradually increase fiber intake. And as long as your GI tract can take it, you should be okay. But don't load up all of a sudden one day you have beans and salad and veggies, and then you're going to have a problem. So just kind of be careful with that.
Okay. Next question. Yes or no to probiotics or probiotic rich foods?
Yes to both. So when I wrote the article, Take Charge of Your Gut Health, it was actually the majority of the conversation was about our gut microbiome. And our gut microbiome is linked to a lot of health issues and can be disturbed or disrupted fairly easily. And definitely a surgery like this, antibiotics after
Hmm.
surgery, all the chemos can disrupt that microbiome. The concern with probiotics is that depending on what you buy, you may get 1, 2, 3 strains of some kind of bacteria, which there are thousands probably out there and housed in our gut. So truly, you may not get the variety and the diversity that we truly want. So you want both. You want 3 things. You want a high fiber diet as much as you possibly can. In this situation, you may be somewhat limited, but if you can work those soluble fibers or some of those fibers into your diet, those are called your prebiotics. That's what's going to fuel all of the gut bacteria in your system. So that's going to help the growth of all of the bacteria in the system. You can use a probiotic, but definitely find one with a good diversity. It may be 5 to 10, different kind of strains, whatever you can find. I know VSL number 3 online is a good one. Culturel over the counter is a pretty good one, but there's a lot of products out there. And so I lost train of thought. You want the probiotic, you want the fuel. I forgot. Oh, and you want the fermented foods. So you want your probiotic in your cultured foods. So kombucha, yogurt, sauerkraut, kefir, any of these fermented foods usually give you a better diversity than just a probiotic. Well, you maybe 10, 15 different kind of strains in, say, a kombucha or yogurt usually has a little less, but a lot of these fermented vegetables or sauerkraut or things like that can be a good source of other types of probiotics. So all 3.
What is kombucha?
Kombucha is a fermented tea. So it's usually a green tea. Look for ones that use a fruit juice rather than some kind of sugar. And then they have their own starter probiotic fermenting pack that ferments the tea. And you have all different kinds of flavors these days. Usually you find the kombucha where the juices are.
Wonderful. Okay, next question. You mentioned the importance of separation of food and drink and meals for stomach-cancer patients post-gastrectomy. How does one reconcile the need to drink while eating to get foods down due to the cancer growth and irritation,
Yeah, it's a
especially
good
someone who deals with regurgitation when eating?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what you're going to do is you're just going to take small sips. What you want to avoid is just downing a whole cup of water or large quantity of fluid along with your food. But definitely take small sips. And maybe if you're even using slightly moistened foods, also kind of helps swallowing and getting it down. But yeah, you take, alternate your bites with a small sip of liquids, and that should be fine. And then hour later, you can take your big cup of liquid.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering the questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time for more questions today. Marie, thank you so much for joining and sharing your
Thank you
expertise.
very
And
much.
if you
It's my
guys have
pleasure.
Any additional questions, you guys can always email me at programs@debbiesdream.org, and we'll try to get those questions answered for you. And again, I'd like to thank our nutrition sponsors. Silver sponsors Merck, bronze sponsors Daiichi Sankyo and Bristol Myers Squibb, and supporting sponsors Lilly Oncology. To view any of our recorded webinars, please visit our lecture library. That concludes today's presentation. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.